That was such a good story, Evelyn. I have no idea about that time tabernacle, and it's so unfortunate that there were no kids here to be in the story and listen, but I think I think we can all be blessed by that story that Evelyn shared. So thank you. I hope that this clicker works. Yes. So hi everyone. It does feel very strange to be here at the front doing a sermon. Normally I'm part of the praise team, or I'm doing a worship host role, or whatever it might be, but I've never actually been at the front to do a sermon. So it's a real honour, and I thank you all for being here today, and I hope that you can please listen and be blessed by what I've prepared for today. So the topic that I've chosen is the cost of your tower. And when I was sort of thinking, when Pastor Gary first approached me and asked if I wanted to do a sermon, I was like, okay, sure, that sounds like a great opportunity, but I have no idea what can you do a sermon about? There's so many stories in the Bible that you can choose from, and there's so many lessons to be learned, and I was really struggling what to choose from. But for those of you, like my family and friends who I are with every week, they would know that I've been reading the book Patriarchs and Prophets by Ellen White, mostly this whole year. It's a really thick book, and it's probably taken me about 6 months to read, but I finally finished it, and it goes through basically from Genesis to it finishes somewhere in the Old Testament, but it goes through, Ellen White really goes in depth about each chapter of the Old Testament in the Bible. And there were so many pages of that book that I highlighted, that I underlined, because it was just so, the words that she had about those stories, it really made those stories come alive. And I really saw things, how back in the Old Testament, there are still so much relevance here in our world today. And one of the chapters that stood out for me in her book was the Tower of Babel, and what she said about, back in Genesis, the story of the Tower of Babel, that really stood out to me. And I'll show you a picture actually, because when I was still struggling, to think of, do I pick this as a sermon topic or do I pick something else? I was still going through, I really didn't know what to choose. But one day I did go over to my parents' house, and they had laid out some of my old school, documents and assignments, from primary school, drawings that I had done in school. And one of them that I saw, one of the first ones that I saw, was this really bad picture, but it's the picture of the Tower of Babel. And this is my depiction of it, I guess, of how it looked like. But for those of you who don't know, the Tower of Babel is often a story that's taught to young kids growing up in Christian schools or in the church. It's one of those stories that I think it's a bit comedic. I think we like to laugh at it, and we think that God was trying to do something funny in the story by changing people's languages, and I think it was I think it's often seen as a child's story, but I think there's a lot more to it, and if you really think about it and look deeper into it, there's a lot more lessons to be learned than just the funny sort of side of the story. But as you can see, this is my picture, and I think I did actually get a good grade for this. I don't know, there's a green sticker on the bottom. I think that means that I did well, but that's my depiction of it. And but I have been to lots of towers, real towers throughout the world in different countries. So one of the first ones is the Tower of Pisa in Italy. And as you can see, I'm doing the typical tourist shot of holding it by my hand. But that was in Pisa. I've been to the Twin Towers, I think. This is in New York City. This is where they used to stand. And it's, for those of you who have been there, it's a huge sort of open space, and they have, I think, people's names of all the people who died in that tragedy. They have them, I think, written all along the perimeter. But then I've been to here. This is in Tokyo, Japan. I think this is called the Skytree Tower. But essentially, you can go up to the top, and I did go up to the top. I know the picture's really small. I was really into like the fishbowl, you know, kind of like weird photo effects of the day. So you can't really see how high the tower is. But I did go up the top and you can see like a lot of Tokyo, Japan, which is really cool. This is the replica of the Eiffel Tower in Las Vegas. So in Las Vegas, they have, you know, all of the sort of famous buildings and such. So this is the fake Eiffel Tower. And then this is the real Eiffel Tower, which me and my mum went to, well, me and my family went to, and for some reason, I don't know why, but we're not really smiling in this photo. I don't know what it was. We did go to Paris in the cold winter months, so maybe that's why we're not smiling as much as we should be. But yeah, so those are some examples of the towers that I've been to in my life. But before we begin and look further into the Tower of Babel, I would just ask that we please just bow our heads in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that you may please be with me now, and also please be with everyone who is sitting here in this congregation now, Lord. And I pray that you may please open our hearts, open our ears to the message that you have for us today. And thank you. Please be with me now. I pray this in your name. Amen. So the story of the Tower of Babel, I assume most of you would be familiar with this story, but it is found in Genesis chapter 11. And you can turn, if you have a Bible, you can please feel free to turn there now. It is the story of the Tower of Babel. It's only a short story. It's 9 verses long, but the text is on the screen as well, which I will read through. So Genesis chapter 11, starting from verse 1. The whole earth had the same language and vocabulary. As people migrated from the east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make oven-fired bricks." They used brick for stone and asphalt for mortar. And they said, "Come, let's build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky. Let's make a name for ourselves, otherwise we will be scattered throughout the earth." Then the Lord came down to look over the city and the tower that the humans were building. The Lord said, "If they have begun to do this as one people, all having the same language, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech." So from there, the Lord scattered them throughout the earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore, it is called Babel, or Babylon in some Bible translations. For there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth, and from there the Lord scattered them throughout the earth. So these people came together to make a name for themselves, and they wanted to build this tower so that they could reach the top of heaven. These people were the descendants of Noah. And Ellen White, one of the co-founders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and someone who had an extraordinary prophetic gift, she tells us that after the flood, the descendants of Noah separated from each other, and a specific group went to settle and dwell on the plain of Shinar, on the banks of the river Euphrates. They were attracted by the beauty of their surroundings and the fertility of the soil in that area. And from that, they decided, yep, let's build a city here. This place is good. It looks prosperous. Let's build a city with a tower. So in essence, these builders of Babel, they were pretty industrious. They were technological. They were well-planned and well-organised. They were essentially city planners in today's language. They were project builders, civil engineers, architects. They were the best of the best. They were resourceful and strategic. They were communicative and engaged. They were prosperous and self-sufficient. They were confident and collaborative, and they were unified in achieving the same goal. So they had a clear vision and a strategy in building this tower. And I look at this list, and I think that there's nothing wrong with this list. I don't think God is displeased at this list of what these people, these attributions. And I think, wouldn't it be amazing if our worldwide church would have all of these attributes? Imagine the the mission that we could achieve if we were all unified in one collaborative strategy, if we were all together, if we were all well-planned, well-organised, resourceful, strategic. I think all of these attributes are actually really good. But why were they building a tower? That is essentially the question we have to ask. Why would they come together and build this tower? What was their reason behind this project? We read in verse 4 of Genesis chapter 11, which is what we just read earlier, that the reason for building the tower was for them to make a name for themselves. In the book Patriarchs and Prophets, Ellen White says they determined to establish a government that should be independent of God. They wanted to establish a monarchy that would eventually embrace the whole earth. Their motivation was driven by fame and self-glory. They wanted to be the rulers of the earth. They wanted to be like God. In Proverbs 16:18, we see the warning against this sort of human pride. Pride comes before destruction, and an arrogant spirit before a fall. This is an interesting foreshadowing of the events that would follow of the Tower of Babel. But we do have a greater insight into their reasoning for building this tower. In Genesis chapter 6, just a few chapters earlier, we can read the story of God sending a flood over all the earth, and in verses 5 to 8, we are told the reason why God sent a flood in the first place. So Genesis chapter 6, verse 5, when the Lord saw that human wickedness was widespread on the earth, and that every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time, the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and he was deeply grieved. Then the Lord said, I will wipe mankind, whom I created, off the face of the earth, together with the animals, creatures that crawl, and birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. But Noah, however, found favor with the Lord. Noah and his family were the only ones to find favor in the world. They were the only ones that did not have evil always in their heart. At that time, the people were so full of evil continuously that it grieved God to the extent that he regretted that he made them in the first place. Ellen White says that as men turned away from God, the divine attributes, justice, purity, and love, they were supplanted by oppression, violence, and brutality. Noah was the only one among earth to have love for God. So God instructed Noah to build an ark for his family and the animals of the earth, because he would be sending a flood to cleanse and destroy the wickedness from the earth. So the floodwaters came. Everyone and everything on earth was destroyed apart from Noah and his family and the animals in the ark. Eventually, the water dried up and Noah and his family settled and lived together. But then God promised to Noah and all of mankind that he would never send another worldwide flood upon the earth to destroy all living things. This was God's covenant. It was from there that Noah's descendants lived and eventually spread out to live in different areas of the land. So the story of what happened with the flood and what happened to Noah and his family, this would have been well known among the people living in the days of the Babel builders. The people of Babel, who were Noah's descendants, they would have known exactly what had happened in the flood. It would have been passed down from generation to generation of what had happened. And while they were building this tower, it was probably in the back of their minds that, hey, we know all these years ago that there was a worldwide flood, and we know that all the wickedness from the earth was destroyed and people lost their lives. In the book Patriarchs and Prophets, we gain further insight into their intentions. The dwellers on the plain of Shinar disbelieved God's covenant that he would not again bring a flood upon the earth. Many of them denied the existence of God and attributed the flood to the operation of natural causes. One object before them in the erection of the tower was to secure their own safety in case of another deluge. By carrying the structure to a much greater height than was reached by the waters of the flood, they thought to place themselves beyond all possibility of danger. And as they would be able to ascend the region of the clouds, they hoped to ascertain the cause of the flood. These people were seeking security from a future flood. They had known what had happened in the first flood from Noah, and they decided, we're going to build a tower in case another flood comes again. It's fine because we'll be able to escape it. We'll build a tower that the waters won't be able to reach. We'll be able to escape God's punishment. We're clever enough. We can build it. If God was to send another flood, this time we will be prepared. We'll secure our own safety in the case of another natural disaster. But by coming together, united in effort to build this tower, they were rebelling against God. After the flood, God directed Noah and his descendants to disperse throughout the land, to replenish it and subdue to it. But the Babel builders were determined to keep their community united in one body. They didn't want to disperse. They wanted to stay together as one. Isn't it interesting that God did not put any prohibitions on where to not go? He just said, don't stay in one place. They had no intention to obey God's commands. So who was leading these people? Who was their leader of this building project? Every building project has to have a leader of some sort. So we can read in just the chapter before, Genesis chapter 10, from verse 8 to 12. Cush fathered Nimrod, who began to be powerful in the land. He was a powerful hunter in the sight of the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a powerful hunter in the sight of the Lord. His kingdom started with Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh and all these other great cities. Nimrod was a mighty hunter. He was known for his power and forging his own path to lead the commissioning of the Tower of Babel. The name Nimrod translated literally means rebellion, or we will rebel. So Nimrod embodied rebellion, but the actual rebellion was not from rebelling against another empire in the land, but rather the rise of his own empire. That was the actual rebellion. And we see the origin of this sort of rebellion in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 13, which started from Lucifer. It says, you said to yourself, and this is talking about Lucifer, I will ascend to the heavens. I will set up my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of the God's assembly in the remotest part of the north. I will ascend above the highest clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Count how many times the word I is used in those verses. The Tower of Babel is a replication of what Lucifer first did in heaven. The first form of rebellion against God was from Lucifer. And just like Lucifer, the people of Babel, they wanted to reach heaven. They wanted to ascend above the clouds. They wanted to make a name for themselves, just like Lucifer did. They wanted a way to heaven that did not require obeying God's commands. They wanted to glorify their own name rather than glorify God's name. So this nature of rebellion and disobedience still exists today. Whenever we are seeking to try to save ourselves, thinking about our own personal advancement or finding security in ourselves outside the will of God, we are repeating the same mistakes as the people of Babel. Instead of turning their hearts to God, the people of Babel, they came together and proclaimed, we don't really feel like repenting because, we want to continue to do our own thing and admire the work of our own hands. And just in case God punishes us again, well, we're going to find a way around it. We're going to find a way around the same consequences that our forefathers lived through. We're going to find a way around repentance. We're going to find a way around doing the will of God. And we're going to find a way around obedience. It seems that the rebellion at Babel is happening once again. Without cultural or speech barriers, man today is rising up. God's words, nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them, that seems to be ringing true today. We see deep space exploration. We see the decoding of the human genome. We see access to information like never before. We can have access to news instantly and other new technologies. Maybe this is one reason wickedness seems to be increasing at such a dizzying pace. We are accomplishing more, but we are trying to make a name for ourselves. Humans and our achievements seem to be idolized in mainstream culture where we hear little of God and his commands. How many of us are following in the same direction? How many of us are trying to find alternative routes to heaven that involve bypassing God's instructions? How many of us are so confident in our works and plans that we are blinded by what God is truly asking of us? How many of us are so caught up in our own success, our own achievements, the admiration that we get from other people? That feels good. But we forget to acknowledge it is only by God's hand that he has blessed you with the skills and the talents and the opportunities that he has given you. How many of us are trying to find loopholes in God's commandments in order to get to heaven? Is it possible that we could be guilty of building our own towers to try to reach heaven, while at the same time not wanting to do what God has asked us to do? Sometimes we are not willing to comply with what God says in order for us to get there. Sometimes it can be too uncomfortable, it can be too overwhelming. Sometimes it can be exactly what we don't want it to be. And we get angry at God. We get frustrated, we get confused at why he's asking us to do this. Why is he asking us to be fruitful and multiply and spread out over the earth, but instead we just want to stay right here. We just want to stay as a community, as one. We don't want to disperse. Or maybe we feel like we can still do what God has asked us to do, but in a different way, through a different approach that meets a different set of standards. It is in our human nature to seek ways we can shortcut things. We have the advent of AI, artificial intelligence, which is now used across many workforces and industries. It can essentially create anything. And in my job, it's become my best friend. I'm joking. But it can essentially do anything. You can write a script to it, you can ask questions, and it will give you exactly what you want it to do. It will give you exactly what you want it to do. It can create anything you want. It can significantly reduce errors, increase accuracy and precision. If you've ever been to an IKEA store, you know that they are famous for their maze-like layout and those little mini showrooms they have on display of like fake apartments or fake houses. They are designed with the goal to increase the time customers spend in the stores, which can lead to impulse purchases. They deliberately set the store up like this so that you could be stuck in these little rooms and take a long time to get through the entire store. But IKEA recognised that not all customers want to follow the required path. There are many shortcut routes to get around the store quickly, but they are not easy to notice. You literally have to find this little sticker somewhere behind a door somewhere if you want to directly cut into the restaurant or directly cut to the checkouts. You have to really make an effort to find them. IKEA changes these shortcut routes constantly. According to one IKEA employee, the reason for that is because customers would get familiar with the shortcuts and know how to zip through the store. IKEA would change the shortcuts occasionally to have customers go around the long way. And I think this is really good manipulation, like tactics to, really try and get customers to buy what you want. So, interesting. Tom Hume, a tech investor, said some interesting things about why, as humans, we use shortcuts. He said, people are smart and know how to go around the system. We're very creative at coming up with hacks for tedious and inefficient processes. As the pace of life has increased, we grew more impatient. Time has become precious. Many times I caught myself taking the stairs in the subway instead of the escalator to save time. Even though the actual saving in time is insignificant, it's the feeling of saving time that makes us feel good, because we hate the feeling of wasting our time. We try to change the system to meet our needs rather than changing ourselves to meet the system. How many of our great endeavours in the church, our programs, our building projects, our far-reaching podcasts and online programs, having events with great crowds of people, that's all great, but are we more focused on our influence and our success rather than God's? God has made us in his image to work alongside him, cooperatively, in bringing his order. Yet sometimes I think we decide that we would rather be independent contractors bringing order for ourselves. In Genesis chapter 11, verse 7 to 8, we see how God intervened in the Tower of Babel. He said, "Come, let's go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech." So from there, the Lord scattered them throughout the earth, and they stopped building the city. God came down and stopped their building project, whether they liked it or not. And he did it for their own good. Ellen White says that the people were fully united in their heaven-daring undertaking. Had they gone unchecked, they would have corrupted the world in its infancy. Already the world at that stage had gone through a worldwide flood to destroy and cleanse the earth from the wickedness. And already again, the descendants of Noah were back to their evil ways of their forefathers. They were again on that same path that was leading the world into corruption. The people had one language at that time, which meant they could achieve things much more quickly, even without today's modern technology and machinery. So God did two things. He confused their language and he scattered them. People began to group together with those who also spoke their own language, and eventually they dispersed as God had originally commanded them to do. The language change, that decreased their productivity, and that diluted their technology base, which stopped their building. But just like God saw their tower building project, God sees your tower building too. Maybe you're striving to do something. You're thinking about it, you're planning it well, you're well organised. You have the resources and the skills to achieve that work. You think that by doing whatever it is you plan to do, it'll take you to where you want to go. But sometimes God comes down and stops your building project. Sometimes, for whatever reason, you're no longer able to keep building your project. Unlike Nimrod, God decommissions the construction of your tower. And we need God to come down and stop our tower building to help us see that there is no alternative path to heaven and there is no security in our own works. He saves us from our own corruption, just like he saved the people of Babel. Because he wants to redirect our building project towards his heart, his commandments, and his love. So how do we know what to do when God stops our building project? How do we know what to do when he stops our building? How do we know what God's commandments to us are? In Matthew chapter 22, verse 35 to 39, Jesus reveals two commandments. It says, "And one of them, an expert in the law, asked a question to test him. 'Teacher, which command in the law is the greatest?' He said to him, 'Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and most important command. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself.'" In 1 John 3:23, John echoes this commandment in his writing. "Now this is his command, that we believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another as he commanded us." And again in 1 John 2:3-4, John reveals the distinction between those who truly follow Jesus and those who don't. This is how we know that we know him. If we keep his commands, the one who says, "I have come to know him," and yet doesn't keep his commands is a liar, and the truth is not in him. So what is the identifier of a true Christian? A person who keeps the commandments of God, a person who loves God and loves others. The writing of John also shows that there is a group of people who claim to know Jesus. They claim to love him, they claim to follow him, but they don't keep his commandments. Look at how many people around the world today want to get to heaven while saying, "Is there another way we can get there, but just without keeping his commandments?" They say, "Yes, I want to get to heaven, but don't talk to me about keeping the laws. That's legalism. I don't want to keep his commandments. I don't need to, but I still want heaven. I still want my reward." There is a great section in the writings of Ellen White where she talks about today's Tower of Babel and how the people who are deceiving themselves, they're following false doctrine. They're resisting truth and believing the lie that salvation can be secured without obedience to God. She says, "Many turn from the plain teachings of the Bible and build up a creed from human speculations and pleasing fables. They point to their tower as a way to climb up to heaven. Lips of eloquence teach that the transgressor shall not die, that salvation may be secured without obedience to the law of God. If the professed followers of Christ would accept God's standard, it would bring them into unity, but so long as human wisdom is exalted above his holy word, there will be divisions and dissension. The existing confusion of conflicting creeds and sects is fitly represented by the term Babylon, which prophecy applies to the world-loving churches of the last days. Friends, there is no other way. The people in Noah's day, they tried to live and seek pleasure in what the world was offering them while resisting to keep the commandments of God's law. In John 14:15 it says, "If you love me, you will keep my commands." If you love God, you will keep his commands. In Luke 14:28, Jesus tells a parable about considering the cost of building a tower. "For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.'" Here, Jesus raises the fundamental point of first considering the cost of a tower before even attempting to build it. Jesus is implying that there needs to be a process for any tower building project. This process includes the careful consideration of not only the monetary cost, but also of everything that will be necessary in order to complete the build, the time spent, the physical effort expended, the relationships impacted. The towers that you and I are building, the towers that we think will bring us salvation and security, have we really sat down to count the cost and consider the implications of what we're trying to achieve? Can we even comprehend the full cost of our towers? And do we even have enough? So I am young. I'm 25 years old, and I know I haven't lived through much of life. I know I haven't gone through the same experiences that you have gone through. But for so many years of my life, even in finishing uni and getting into my early career, that's all I was striving for. That was the tower that I was building, is to be successful, to have a good job, to earn the respect of my colleagues and friends and family. To say that, yes, I am doing well, I'm fine, I'm secure, I've got good income. That was the tower that I've been trying to build for years. And I think the thing that I want to tell you is that however far you go in building your career, or whatever you want to do, have the perfect family, or, buy the house of your dreams, or, move away to a city and enjoy life in a different culture, whatever it might be, you're never going to be happy. You're never going to be fully in line with God's will unless you are following what He has asked you to do. The tower that we are building, the tower that I have built myself, has just been centered around me. It's always been me focused. And I feel like that when I was reading back through what Lucifer did in his rebellion in heaven, it was all about him. And I think we need to stop and take a look at the sort of towers that we are building in our own lives, and we need to think and reflect about which direction they are heading. What sort of tower are you building? And do you even have enough to build it? In Ephesians 2, 8-9, it says, "For you are saved by grace through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is God's gift, not from works, so that anyone can boast." We are not saved by our works. It is not through our works that we can be saved. It is only through Jesus. Jesus is the tower. Jesus said in John 14:6, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Peter, when he was filled with the Holy Spirit, said in Acts 4:11-12, "This Jesus is the stone rejected by you builders, which has become the cornerstone. There is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to people by which we must be saved." Jesus didn't come down to earth just to stop our tower building. He came to be the tower itself. He came to bridge the gap between heaven and earth so that we could reach him. Psalm 18:2 says, "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. My God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold." Psalm 61:3, "For you have been a refuge for me, a strong tower in the face of the enemy." Psalm 144, verse 2, "My loving kindness and my fortress, my high tower and my deliverer, my shield and the one in whom I take refuge." Proverbs 18:10, "The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are protected." David had Jesus as his strong tower. Jesus knew that we could never pay the cost of our own towers. It is a debt that we could never pay. No matter how hard we strive to reach heaven by our own works, it would never be possible. Even if the people of Babel had 1,000 or 10,000 years to build, they would never reach heaven. It would be impossible. The tallest building in our world today, that is nowhere near heaven. We will always never have enough. The cost will always be far too great for us to pay. But Jesus, before he came down to this earth, he sat down and counted the cost of his tower. He did all the right calculations and made sure that what he was going to do would be enough to complete it. He made sure it would be enough for you and for me. He left heaven and came down to this earth as a baby, and he lived among us. He spent time with sinners. He spent time with unclean, uneducated, and unholy people, the worst kind of people. He loved them and healed them. Jesus began laying the foundation of his tower. He recruited 12 disciples. He began teaching and performing miracles. And as he increased in popularity, word about him spread to those who were seeking to put an end to him. They wanted to silence him. They wanted to overthrow him. They wanted to kill him. These Pharisees and Jewish leaders, they were more satisfied in building their own towers of Babel rather than opening their hearts to Jesus and accepting him as their strong tower. They failed to see that it was only through Jesus that salvation could be secured, rather than by works. Jesus was betrayed by his own disciple and taken into custody. He was arrested, interrogated, beaten, whipped, and put through the most torturous process of mental, physical, and psychological pain that one could ever experience. People mocked him, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish." The people were too focused on themselves to recognize the strength of his tower. He was taken to the cross where he would spend his final moments. Even there, at that awful, awful scene, people kept shouting. They kept laughing and mocking, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish." But it was there on the cross, in his final hours, that Jesus, bowing his head, he said the words, "It is finished." For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish." This man, Jesus, he did finish. He is our strong tower and the leader of our lives. So friends, I urge you, stop building your towers of Babel. Stop following the Nimrods of this world. Stop looking for loopholes in God's law. Stop striving to get your idea of heaven by the work of your own hands. Make Jesus your strong tower, because he has already paid the cost of your tower and he has finished it. Thank you.